Jai Baba, everybody. Now, before we start this morning's theme, which is what has happened since the Darshan, I want to make sure that everybody spoke who was there and wanted to speak.
So before the Darshan, my wife and I, Lois, were taking care of Ann and Al Forbes, and we were staying at the Turf Club. And when we got there, it was, I forget when it was, but in any event, we got in our rooms and we were right behind Elizabeth and Jane. And then pretty soon, a couple of young teenage girls that were on the trip who had tried to run away from their parental guidance, they changed places with us, and we got to the room that we were supposed to be in, and they got back there behind Jane. And let's see, the next thing was going to eat, actually. And this was happened to be late at night, and I was tired, and we went down there. I think it was 10 or 12, something like that, and they wanted to give us a dinner, was on the docket. And I got there, had to go back and get a coat because it was formal dining. And then we started going to the 10 days that we were there, it was like going to basic training. They had us lined up and everything was guided every moment. So we would, I was taking care of Al Forbes, and they had a meeting with the men Mondley, and Erich and Francis were talking, and Al was sitting in a chair by me, and he would nod off, and I would nudge him, try to wake him up, and he'd nod off again, and they were talking, and I turned to not hit him again, and I noticed some people back there, and it was the women Mondley behind the curtains out there. They were laughing at us. Yeah. And let's see, when Francis and Erich were welcoming us, nobody got up to talk or anything, so Lois nudged me. She says, "I want to get up and say something." I said, "Okay, up we go." So we went around Baba's bedroom, and back there were just behind the speakers, and I asked if Lois could say something. Erich said yes. So she came out. I think she said words to the effect that we from the Miami group have answered the invitation of the king and have come across the ocean to bow our heads at Baba's feet, at the Avatar's feet. And that was the gist of it. But I was looking out I was behind the curtains looking out, and I could see Mara, who was usually quite solemn, and she was very, very happy having heard something like that, because nobody was saying anything, except Erich and everybody else like that. Yeah, there's two other things. That's right. I'm sorry. Thank you. We got to go to Baba's chair, and Lois had RA, so we were last. We thought we were last, but we got up to the chair, and Darwin Shaw was there, and he was bowed down, and we were standing behind him, and he turned around, and I think he thought he was supposed to be last, and he turned around and he looked a little put off because we were there. But in any event, we did queue up to go by Mara, and after I passed by, Lois came up there, and as soon as Mara saw Lois, she grabbed her arm, and then Monty and the other women Mondley there got us all together, and I took a picture of them. I thought I had it in here, but I don't. I'll find it someplace. But
Wendy has it. It's a big picture.
Yeah, that's right. Wendy does have that. Yeah.
The mound of
And I think that was it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I did not go with a group or a flight for that matter, due to circumstances, mainly being that I didn't have any money. I ended up hitchhiking. I got a cheap flight from Los Angeles to London for like $100, and then hitchhiked across Europe and Asia, and it's a long way. I assure you. And it was, and by the time I got there, I was in pretty bad shape. I mean, because I was, I really ran out of money. I was robbed on the way. I mean, I was just traveling on trains without tickets and sleeping on railway platforms. And I ran out of those little halazone tablets you were supposed to put in your water. So I just filled up my canteen on the railway platform, and it was 100 and something degrees. I mean, you got to drink water, right? So anyway, I finally arrived in Pune. I think it was on the 17th of May, and in the evening. And then the next morning, I got up to go to Guru Prasad. Of course, I didn't know where Guru Prasad was. And so I was just asking various people. In India, they'll always say, "Oh, yes, yes, down there, down there." So I finally stumbled in there about 9:30 or so. I'm always late to everything, so I walk in, and the Guru Prasad was full of all these Indians from South India, because there were no groups of Westerners and there were so many Easterners. They split the group to have half of these people. I don't know where they were from, Andhra or someplace where they speak Telugu. And it's just incomprehensible sound. And so they had half the people in the morning and half in the evening. So I didn't know what was going on. And so I just walked in and sat down on the floor. Of course, I didn't take my flip-flops off because I didn't know you were supposed to. And there had been this man up on stage who seemed to be sort of in charge, this Indian fellow. He would speak some English, and then this other Indian guy would, ramble on. And then the next thing I know, this man was looking at me, and he said, "Who are you?" So that was how Erich greeted me, not "You have kept your appointment with God." Who the hell are you? And I said, "I'm Bill Files." I'd sent a telegram saying, I was coming. We were all supposed to do that. Back before Baba passed, you sent these telegrams to Mayorji's office, White Cloud. Anyway, so he said, yes, yes, okay. And he said, "Oh, take your shoes off." And at that moment, I felt totally humiliated. I realized then but anyway. So he then led me around to the side, and then he led me up on the stage, which was the worst thing in the world for me. And and he said, "This is Bill Files has got here from California," and everybody was going Jay Baba. Anyway, but then fortunately he took me over to the little Min Mandali room where I spent the rest of the day and pretty much the rest of the trip really with just being a fly on the wall and just hanging around with Francis Brabazon, and Dr. Donkin, and Erich.
Did you sleep there?
No, that was another problem. I had, with one of my last remaining rupees, got a room across the street from the railway station at this place called the Railroad Hotel, which was, it was really nasty, yeah. Bunk beds just full of snoring Indians, and also full of bed bugs, I found out the next morning. I was bitten head to toe by bed bugs. And so that also, the next interesting thing happened was that I had been spotted by Mara and the ladies when I came in. And then this whole sort of train of people started coming. It started with Go Hair, to see if, check my vital signs. And then Arnavas brought this delicious breakfast of scrambled eggs and toast with butter and jam. And some coffee, I think. Yeah. It's very sweet. And then Mani. It was really just one after another. So I got to meet everybody that way. And then Mani was pretty horrified by my condition, and I said, "Where are you staying?" And whatnot.
How much did you weigh now?
Huh?
How much did you weigh now?
Well, by then I was down to around 100 pounds.
Oh.
Same height I am now, yeah.
Starting
Yeah, well, there's a thing called dysentery when you drink Indian water. And it's a highly effective weight reduction.
Were all the other Westerners gone? Or
Yeah, there was nobody there really. There was Carrie Ben Shammai was there from Israel for a day or two. She was kind of a character. I don't know if anybody here's ever met her. And then the Australian group, it was actually their last day. They were out at Maribod.
Oh.
And they came back that evening, and Monty said, she set me up to stay at the Gulmore with, I think, gratis, because Marigie's son-in-law ran the Gulmore. And she also arranged for my meals, and that night I had dinner with the LePage family, which was fun.
Wow.
And so then I very rapidly kind of came back to life, with food and clean water, And so really I spent my time just, meeting the Mondley, long talks with them, and just really being a fly on the wall. Because the Australians came there the next morning just to say goodbye, and then they were gone. And then Don Stevens came, and that was nice, because Monty said, you go meet Don Stevens, and then Don took me out to Maribod. He had Marigie's car and driver. So we went out to, meet Audie at his office, which was just incredible. Audie's office was, anybody who'd been there back in those days with all the photos on the wall, and it was quite amazing. And then Marizov was, to me, like a ghost town. I mean, it was just so barren. It was, it was all whitewashed, and there was no veranda out front or anything. I mean, it was really just very simple. And I remember going back to Baba's room. I said, well, where's that? And they said, you go back through the Mondley Hall, which was not much to it, really. And then, walk back to the back. And I walked back there, and they had one of Baba's dogs back there guarding his room. I thought the dog was going to kill me, but fortunately the chain did not break. Big, black, nasty dog. And then we went to Maribod, which was fun. We and met Mohammed the Must, and in Padre, of course. So we're there, and we run it back veranda there, and Mohammed's out in the yard, like this, digging for dish. Yeah. So I was, and he was looking at us and saying something, Oh, and he was squatting, actually. Now that I think about it, he was like this. And it was really hot, by the way. And he was in the blazing sun. It was probably 120. They were having a heat wave that year. So he was saying something to us, and I said, well, what's he saying? What's he saying? I thought, what is the great Must saying? The Bill Files has come, or something. Your mind works. It's like some great spiritual thing. And he said, he says, the ants are eating his balls. Because he was squatted over an anthill.
Oh, I thought you meant your balls.
Yeah. No, anyway. So it was, another bubble burst, Because I was real young. I was, I just turned 18. I was new to Baba. And, I was really kind of confused the whole time, actually, kind of sorting it out, because I'd been into Yogananda and Ramakrishna, and my dream had actually been to go to India and be with a master and all that. And then I heard of Baba and, jumped at that chance. And anyway, I'm trying to remember. Then going up to Baba's tomb was interesting, because Don had the car and he was going to drive through the village. And back then you could see the tomb from down below. There wasn't so much foliage, you could look up and see it. So I said, well, where's the tomb? He says, it's up there. I said, well, I'll just go. I'll just walk. I'll meet you up there. So I walk out in the sun, no hat, flip-flops. But that was just, how I was. So, but it was all right. I got up there and went in the tomb, and it was real hot inside the tomb. It was even hotter. I guess you who went know how hot it was. It was really hot. And no, I did not see God or anything like that, but it was nice to be there.
Were you the only one?
I was Well, just Don, I was with Don Stevens.
But I mean, there were no other.
Actually, there were some other people there because Irwin and Edward Luck were there. And then actually I went back to the tomb a week later when some of the kids came from England, and I went back there with them. And a fellow named Peter Bussey showed up. In fact, I met him there at the tomb. I was hoping he'd come. I saw him the other day, but I guess, anyway, he's not here. So, because he also went to the Darshan after he was wandering around India and ended up in Ahmednagar and somehow heard about Baba, and he had just shown up that day, I think.
Wow.
So he stayed there for a while and then went to the Darshan towards the end. Anyway, so I went back, and mostly my days was I would get up in the morning and I would come over. And I think I went more than 4 days. I think I just went every day, and would just come. And like one day I remember I came and I sat down, and it was 9 o'clock, and Monty they're all busy. It's funny, they don't sit around, they're all doing something. And so I said to Monty, Monty, it's 9 o'clock. I said, it's time for Darshan. And she dropped what she was doing immediately, sat down on the floor with me and said, this is your Darshan. What would you like to do? And I was like, I'm just happy to sit here with you. I mean, I didn't really have anything I wanted to do. I was just happy to be there. But it was just nice that she dropped everything, that whatever it was she was doing, because it was 9 o'clock, and I mentioned it. But most of the time I just, I talked to this one, I talked to that one. And at the end, Mara wanted me to come over, so, I got to go over and, say hello to her and stuff. And then it came down to the last day, and I was getting ready to leave, and it's hard to tell this for me. This wave of love came over me. I don't know where it came from. And then things started making sense, because I had never really got the whole idea about, Baba's emphasis on love, because I'd been into yoga and I'd been into meditation and all that kind of stuff. And, but it still took a while. I mean, then I went back, I hitchhiked back to London.
Wow, again?
Well, how else was I going to go?
Did you have money this time? Did they give you?
Well, actually, Monty gave me $100.
Wow, wow.
And then also I'd been robbed of my traveler's checks in Afghanistan. And when I went to the American Express office in Bombay on my way to, to Pune, and told them, what had happened, and what they say on TV is not true. You don't get your money back right away, especially if you're a dirty hippie traveling through India. And they just kind of said, well, we have to send this to our London office, you'll get your money in 3 months or something. But just for the heck of it, on my way back in Bombay, I went to the office and there was my money. So now I had 100 from Monty and 100 from the American Express. So I was able to travel in style. I didn't have to sit in the back of the truck, so I could sit in the front. Because hitchhiking in Asia, it's not really just hitchhiking, you're negotiating. Everything, you're negotiating all the time with people about, how much a ride would be. It's mostly fuel trucks coming out of Iran going in different directions. And you can ride in the back, which is real stinky, or you can ride, it's a little space between the driver's seat and the back window. So if they like you, or if you can sit there, And then I did have some money, so I could take buses on the way back. So the way back was a lot easier. Yes?
How long did the 2 trips take you from London?
Well, from London to Pune was about 6 weeks. And I was really trying to keep, going, because there was a deadline to get there. The way back was interesting. It really only took about 2.5 weeks or so going back, because every time I would get somewhere, the next mode of transportation would show up. It was really quite amazing. And so I just went basically straight through without stopping. Because, Baba had said to go straight home and all that. But then I got to England and I'd run out of money, and so I ended up staying there for a month. But that was okay, because I'd met some of the English people, and Dudley Edwards, took me in, so I stayed at his flat out in Richmond. So that was nice. And the best part of being in England was I spent a lot of time with Baba's brother, Adi. I would go over there. Yeah, I usually show up around dinner time, funny thing. You know how that works. And because Franny is one of the best cooks in the world, just fabulous. You know, just simple, you know, Persian food, you know, Persian Indian food. And he really helped me a lot to sort out a lot of things because it was a transition from, at least to me, from being a yogi, meditator, mystical type to, because I'd had all these experiences, which is how I got into this thing. And so he helped me sort a lot of that out. And then one other thing that I know Janet will want me to say was that I met this woman named Maud Kennedy, who was this Baba lover, lived out in Oxfordshire, in a little farm, little house out there. And she invited me to come out and stay at her house. And I didn't know her. I asked Adi, and he said, yes, you should go immediately. So I did. I actually did go immediately. I went out and hitchhiked and went up to Oxfordshire. Hitchhiked to Oxford, and, you know. And so I stayed there in this little old farmhouse with a winding stone stairway. I don't know if anybody here's been there. It's quite an amazing. You have been, of course. And she did a lot to cure my ills because I still had, you know, stomach trouble. She made me dash about the garden soup, and we would walk on the canals and pick wild watercress, and, you know, just stuff like that. I mean, really, it helped me a lot to get my system working again. And she also did not get to meet Baba, even though she'd been a Baba lover since the early 60s. She was supposed to go to the East-West gathering, but for some reason she didn't get to go. And so she had this whole inner relationship. She was also a very mystical person. And she had this whole inner relationship with Baba, so that was good for me to talk with her, because it was still a confusing time, you know, because you know, we'd all wanted to have Baba's, our master in the body, and he was gone, you know. So to me, it was a lot to sort out, and it took a while. But Maud and Baba's brother were very helpful, so I sort of feel like my London time was as much a part of my Darshan as my Pune time. Yeah. And then I came back to LA and moved back into the Baba bookstore.
Back to LA.
Oh. My mother, I had to send a letter to my mother to get me another $100 for this cheap charter flight to London. That's how I got there. They had these incredibly cheap charter flights. They were like $100 from LA to London. And so she got me a ticket back. So then, and this all took a month. You know, there was no internet, there was no cell phones, there was, and even an international call was like cost prohibitive. So it took about a month, and then I went back.
So how did you get into England with your $50?
Oh, that was a problem. I'm glad you mentioned that. Because what happened was, Don Stevens gave me his business card. You know, Don Stevens, Vice President, you know, Chevron Oil, you know, International Crude Marketing. And he said, if you have any problems, you call me when you get to. You know. So I'm there, and because there was a rule that any Americans had to have at least $100 on them, or they would not be allowed into England. Wow. And I only had maybe 50 or something left. So the guy's, you know, interrogating me, and and I looked like hell. I mean, you can imagine I was still not.
You have long hair?
Not real long. No, I never had real long hair. Oh. And but I still was, I think I had, maybe one shirt that I just washed every now and then. I mean. Anyway, so I remembered Don's card, so I pulled it out and I handed it to him, and I said, well, my friend Mr. Stevens said if there's any problems, just give him a call. And the guy looks at it, and he looks at me. And so that was that. So there you go.
Thank you.
It's interesting because I was there and I was 12 years old, I think. So it's through the eyes of a child. And
What's your name?
Greg Rosen, and Ruth Rosen was my mother, and Bert. But what I remember most is the love, and that's really what I have to say. You know? That I will never forget meeting them on the league. And there are certain other things, you know, bits and pieces when you were talking that brought back some memories. But it was the love that I remembered most. And I've spent the last number of years painting Baba, trying to get back that feeling. So that's basically the story.
Were you the only 12-year-old?
No, it was Raphael was with me, so we were kind of partners in crime. And I think Jeffrey Muller, was he on that trip? Yes.
Chris Ott was there. He was 9. He said 19.
On
No,
New
he
York?
was on.
I'm on the New York group.
9.
The New York group. Yeah, I was on the New York group.
And there was Shelley. He went at separate times.
She was only
Oh,
7.
Anyway.
you each had a week, different times?
Yeah.
Oh.
Larry Parrish was on you.
All right, finally getting it.
But I don't really remember.
Larry was our age.
But how old was Larry?
He was in Chicago.
Larry was our age.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my story.
Hello, my name is Barbara Scott. I was Barbara Gunn in 1969. And I feel that we were very privileged as Westerners. Different people stayed in different places, but a lot of the married couples got to stay at the Puna Club. And we had elegant meals and people with funny hats serving us, and it was all very grand, and we had a lot of leisure time in between the trips that we did take, as someone's mentioned, where they said, "Time to get on the bus," and you would have to rush and get on the bus and go. You didn't even know where you were going; you just got on the bus. But generally, I felt that we were very well taken care of, and one of the lessons that I took away from it was really about the difference between the poverty of India and the poverty of anywhere else that I'd ever been. It was only the second time that I've ever even been on an airplane, and it was a learning experience for me. I do recall the words that they said that first morning about, you've traveled across illusion to bow down to Mayor Baba in your hearts. And I think that was very true. And I've been rereading my own book, The Empty Chair, so that I could remember what I did, because, really I hadn't thought about it much in all these years. And I do recall that the preparation for the trip was almost as involving as getting there. We had to find money, and we thought at first we were going to go see Mayor Baba, and then we weren't, and there were all sorts of. I had a baby in January 26, 1969, a few days before Baba dropped the body, and things happened that caused everybody to have a lot of crucial build up to the actually getting there, and then getting there and being in such a it was like being on the upside down of the world. The absolute opposite of everything you're used to is what it was like in India. In India, I'm sure has changed, but at that time it was nothing like being in the United States. And one thing that impressed me very much was the mandali, because this is retrospective, I admit, but they had lost Meher Baba, who was the person that was closest to them on earth. And yet somehow they got together this wonderful entertainment for us, places to stay, and hundreds of people coming and staying in different hotels and sending the telegrams and all of the things that were involved. They willingly took that on, and they were there, and they were cheerful. And I thought that was absolutely amazing. And one of probably the nicest things that happened for me was after the very first day, we were outside at Guru Prasad, and Marshall and I and some other people were there, and someone introduced us as being from Chapel Hill, and Eric said, "I wish I could put it before your eyes how proud Baba made us to feel of Chapel Hill." And that was a great reward, you know, for all that we had been through. And it seemed like, for me, that after the Darshan, it was like a training, almost like a training of some kind, as well as like having been through a honeymoon, maybe. And then, you know, I had obeyed Baba in the last way that I could possibly obey Meher Baba in this lifetime. And so it was like then, it was just going to be up to me to like get on with my life. And that's how I felt about the Darshan, that I was coming back to just be Barbara and see what happened next. And in my book, I quoted from an old shape note hymn, which I'm just going to do this one little verse because I think it was how I felt about what was going to happen, and how, and thinking of the Mandali and how they had just gone on and done what they needed to do despite this terrible loss. And the shape note hymn, I think it's called "When Shall I See Jesus," but the second verse was the one that I quoted in my book. It says, "For now I am a soldier, my captain's gone before. He's given me my orders and bid me ne'er give o'er. His promises are faithful, a righteous crown he'll give, and all his valiant soldiers eternally shall live."
I think we have heard from everybody about the Darshan itself. And this next 45, 50 minutes, let's talk about what has happened as a result of having been there. What have we learned? What has happened? What's the essence of, what's the meaning of having been there for that extraordinary time? Were you there?
I was supposed to be there. I had a ticket, but I wound up not being able to go because my parents said they'd have me arrested. So I fasted for 3 days, but I already was. In fact, one of the things I want to share is, I don't know if everyone knows, because I was saying I went through a whole struggle with my family, and I was reading over the family circulars from that Bob had issued, and there was one thing that said, if it causes family disharmony, not to come, and you'll benefit equally as if you came. And so I opted for that, but if Mayor Bob had still been alive, I would have fought like a tiger. I would have gotten there. But I wasn't, I was only 17, I think we're about to turn 18, and I wasn't emotionally that mature or independent. So I really needed my parents' blessing for me to do it. But if it was a matter of meeting Bob, I would have done it without their blessing. But at any rate, years later, Lennart told me that everyone who was on the list that had paid to go, their names were read out to Mayor Baba at least 3 times. Baba ordered that. I don't know if you all know this, so that's like another link we all have with Mayor Baba, that, except those of us who corresponded with him, he heard our names. He knew that each one of us was coming to meet him. So that was an interesting thing. And now I first met Mayor Baba in 1956 on my way home from Hebrew school. Inwardly, he spoke to me for over an hour. And he didn't identify himself as Mayor Baba, but I knew who it was. I knew he was the Christ. I knew he was omniscient. And I knew I was deeply connected with him from lifetimes. So I had an early inner link with Baba, very strong. And then When I was 16, I heard a friend about Mayor Baba as a historic being, he was still alive, and felt deeply connected to him. And then, what happened about trying to get to the Darshan. And then since then, my life has gone, like all of ours, in various meandering paths, and I felt that always I was getting closer to Baba, ineluctably somehow, but there were times of great disappointment, but I never lost my conviction in Mayor Baba. And then in 2009, I was already living here. I've been here 14 years. I went to take a sabbatical at Pendle Hill. It's a Quaker school community. It's been there since 1930. And one of the things I did was I had done it before when I was there a number of years earlier. I just started doing maple sugaring. And I don't know if any of you know, I'm not going to explain the process. But one time, late afternoon in early January 2009, I was gathering up the last of the sap to boil down to make the syrup. It's about 40-to-1 ratio. So it's very intensive, it's a very alchemical process, especially if you do it outdoors. And a drop, it was falling like about drop. It hovered and caught the reflection of the sun as it was midway in the air, and time stopped. And I saw all the civilizations that ever existed on Earth, and all the civilizations that ever will exist on Earth, all the battles that were ever waged from time immemorial. I saw it all within a nanosecond. It's not, it's not logically possible, but I did. I saw it, and what I did see was that the reason God allows all this mayhem of slaughtering each other on battlefields is because He clearly knows that the soul can't perish. But I actually saw that. I mean, it's one thing to read about and God speaks or discuss it, but I saw it. That's absolutely true. And a few weeks after that, within a few months, my whole inner life changed. I was going through tremendous fear and anxiety and deep depression attacks just about every day, and not for my whole life, but that was one of the periods. All that vanished. I haven't had to take a tranquilizer in like many years, and I never get worried, and I don't never get depressed, and I never get frightened. So that was a tremendous bestowal that Baba gave me, and I certainly feel that He kept His promise to me that I would benefit equally as if I had come. And one more thing, this October I had an experience where my heart stopped for 5 minutes as a result of some medical issues, and I met with Mayor Baba. I went through a tunnel of light, and he looked just like he did in 1937 with the long flowing hair. He greeted me, embraced me, and then he said to me, "Ira, if there are 9 steps to death, tonight you've taken 8 of them, but you will not take the 9th. I am blocking you." Put his right hand up and sending you back to earth. You are destined to go back and live many more years in the same body before you come here again. And so that was an amazing thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara, for kind of setting the stage. Because I think for me also, the Chapel Hill experience 2 years earlier was when the Baba's Darshan in which he really let me know, who he is. So there's many adventures, of course, in the process of trying to get the money together and all that, and I'll just briefly mention agreeing with Barbara, the poverty really got me. Going through Bombay at 4 o'clock in the morning and seeing all these objects along the road, and suddenly going, "Oh, hey, those are people," sleeping. That struck me. The welcoming of the Bombay was this mentioned yesterday at all? The "We welcome you." That was just really heartwarming at the the Bombay Baba group had us over, and aside from that, I'll just I had some kind of humorous experiences in Pune. Well, I'll say we had been told by our Baba lover guides, which stores to shop at. So I ignored that. So I went into a store, I think it was called Liberty, and was immediately met by a beautiful 18-year-old Baha'i girl who was the daughter of the owner of the store, who spent the entire week trying to convert me into Baha'i. Even met me at the train on the way out. It was and then, of course, I wasn't here yesterday, so I didn't hear what people said, but the experience of going and buying down at the chair with Baba's picture was uncomfortable, I'll say, and in a way, and I expected to feel Baba's presence, and I didn't. And the second day, same thing, and so I think I sort of gave up expecting, and then I think I felt that I was maybe a little more sensitive by not expecting, and so perhaps I may have been given a little glimpse of what he was really doing, who knows. And that's all I'll say. It was I'll go on to a little bit of follow-up. Right after that, I went to I ended up in Utah with the VISTA Volunteers Program, also known as Staying Out of Vietnam. And I felt I really did kind of feel the sense of how can I say it? The sense of feeling close to Baba, I'll say, during that time, and I had the good fortune of spending a weekend in a Trappist monastery in the mountains of Utah, and that was a wonderful experience of being able to be with other people that felt the same sort of call to the divine. And I'll let it go at all that. So,
Thank you.
Okay, so I told you yesterday about my two darshans, really, in 1969 when I felt the presence of God just descend on the whole room. And I had a lot of other things that happened after that, but the bigger things happened after when I came back 21 years later, and I felt Baba's presence in my own body. And I went to the Dooney fire that time, which may have been a big mistake. And I thought, well, why don't we get rid of as much karma as we can in this lifetime? So, you're supposed to throw in a piece of paper or a little stick that represents some emotional aspect or sanskaric thing you want to get rid of. So I was really kind of over-ambitious and stupid. So I threw in lust, anger, and greed.
Oh my God.
So,
Still alive.
Needless to say, Baba let me have it after that. Within a year after that, had a major car accident where this idiot cop went running through a red light and hit me at 45 or 55 miles an hour. And I swear to you, I was sure I was going to die then. And the only thing I had a chance to get out was, oh, Baba. But I think Baba may have actually physically moved my car forward by about 18 inches because, I saw this guy and I knew he was going to hit me. But when the accident was over, and I looked at the car later, the maximum point of impact was about 18 inches behind me, and there was all these splinters of steel into the car. Where if he had hit me where I was sure he was going to hit me, if Baba didn't move that car forward, there would have been 18 inches of steel through my kidneys and spleen and pancreas and all these other things I didn't know I had in me yet because I hadn't gone to medical school yet. But that created chronic pain in me that went on for 10 years or more, probably more like 12. But I also had some of the greatest luck of my life, which was finding my wife Claudia, who is, any of you have ever met her know, she is infinitely valuable. She's also the best cook on the planet too. But anyway, so she helped me with some of this pain over the years. But I worked through acupuncture and chiropractors and osteopathic manipulation, which made me wind up wanting to go to osteopathic medical school. So now I'm a doctor who specializes in lifestyle medicine and teaches people diet and nutrition and other things related to lifestyle, like sleep patterns and that sort of thing, so that they can avoid chronic disease, live longer and healthier all the way till the end. But anyway, be careful if you get near that Dooney fire. Don't throw in quite so much.
I would just like to say something brief about my own life after Darshan. The biggest event, I think, after the Darshan was my getting dengue fever and coming home to the West with dengue fever. And at one point it looked like I would die, but I was so filled with Baba's love. I was in an exalted state, and I was that way for weeks after. And that's when I really knew Baba was in my veins, Baba was in my breath, in every cell in my body. And what can I say? Baba burned a lot of bad out, let in a lot of good.
Okay, this is kind of a variation on that theme. One of the most interesting things that has happened to me in the last 10, 15 years since I retired and started working on Baba projects is that if I'm cleaning a picture or scanning something or writing or creating a book or whatever, my focus is on the computer screen and somehow the self in me just sort of goes away and the creation is there. And I'm sure that's true of musicians like Jim Meyer. When you perform, you're in the music. You're not yourself anymore, kind of. So that's something to think about.
Keeping it brief. First of all, if I wasn't keeping it brief, every single day of my life extends from the Darshan. But to pick two things. First, because of my feeling of Baba there, I have welcomed His grace to bring me back many times to Maribad. And I felt like I was going to see Him in form. It wasn't like He dropped His body. But after the 6th or 7th visit, I learned that He had said that after He dropped His body, to go to His samadhi would be exactly the same as meeting Him in form in every single way except one. And that one exception was that our physical eyes would not see His physical form. So I'm grateful He's graced me to come back. Not that He's not here right now, just in the same way, but so that's one thing. He's kept pulling me back like that. And the other, I guess, one thing that I would mention, a few years later, I guess it was 1972, I was sitting in the samadhi for about 6 hours. In those days, you could sit wherever you wanted. I was sitting on the windowsill, resting my back against the shutter. And after 6 hours, you know, your mind kind of wanders here and there, and mind wanders. And what happened was my mind would be wandering and I'd be worrying about this or that when I get back. And then my gaze would just come and fall. And the inscription on his samadhi, I have come not to teach, but to awaken. The first line, the first 3 words, I have come. And I'd have these worries and I have come. Oh, that doesn't matter anymore. And then my mind would wander. I have come. Oh. And it would just blow away all the energy, all of everything. And then I would again, and then I have come. So he's here with us now. He has come. Jai Baba.
Going to the Darshan was the most important event in my life. There's no doubt at all. And I had been a Baba lover for a number of years by that time, and I always felt I would meet Baba. And then he had the audacity to drop his body. And my first reaction was just totally selfish. It's like, I'm not going to see him. But then we very quickly figured out we were going anyway. And the 2 things that happened that shaped my life the most since then was I got to be around Mara a lot at that Darshan. I didn't know she was so accessible, and a lot of people were kind of, I don't know, just hesitant to approach her, but she welcomed me, and I got to spend a lot of time with her, and that has been immensely important. And the other thing that happened is when people were playing and doing their performances and stuff, I was just too chicken. I was just absolutely chicken. But I made a decision then that what I really wanted to do with my life was music. And I've been very fortunate that for most of my life, I've been able to support myself with music. So that's what Darshan has done. Now I live in India. I mean, who would have thought this in a million years? But Darshan, I'm sure you all have this experience. Nothing else has. That was it for me. Jai Baba.
I just want you to know, I have my boarding pass and I'm ready to get on that plane.
Is that the same bag?
Yes, this is my original bag from the trip. And I didn't know it, but even then I was an archivist. I never knew. Okay. What I wanted to say, I hope I can say really briefly, and it's about the subject of what has happened since the Darshan. I was like Cindy, I think I said yesterday, if you heard me, the shock of Baba leaving was really deep, but it never changed the idea that I would indeed go. I never thought twice about not going. And who Baba was, it didn't change anything. And not that I thought it through, but that was just the response. Anyway, so since then, it's been very, very clear to me, and Baba continues to work in such a way that I can almost see his fingers moving at the end of his chair in my life. And he has literally picked me up, and I feel like I'm always in the palm of his hand. And through all the stuff that has been exceedingly painful, and all the stuff that has been great joy, it all is his. Every single thing is his grace. And if there was anything that I learned, that's it. The rest is still all sanskaric nonsense, you know. And we have to have that nonsense. And even that is his grace. Those are his tools. That's what I've learned. That the sanskaras have to be there so that you can work your way back. So in a way, we have to be grateful for all the crap, as well as all the glory, and it's all him. That's all I have to say.
Well, when we were talking, I was reading about what this morning was about. I thought, well, you know, everything comes from Darshan, you know, in my life. But just now when I was listening, I realized something I'd never realized before. I mentioned yesterday that when Baba dropped his body, I was desolate. And even after Darshan, I was still desolate. And it was largely because I was such a mess. And I didn't know what to do with my life. I had no idea. I was just a wreck. And I thought that when I went and met Baba, that somehow he would let me know what to do. And of course, he wasn't there to tell me what I wanted him to tell me. But what happened was that I kept going back to India. For, you know, not long periods of time, but significant periods of time, like every year after Darshan, for several years. And my father had died and left me some money, so I was able to do that. And then one year I went and I lived in Europe for like over a year or something, and then I went to India. And the Mandali had become like my aunts and uncles by then. I was there so much, and at that time you could spend all the time you wanted to with them, really. And when I was getting ready to leave, Ira came up to me and he said, "Where are you going now?" And I said, "Well, you know, I don't really know. I haven't figured this out. You know, I'm going to go back to the States for a while, and then I don't know what I'll do." And Ira said, "You need to bind your lower self in order to free your higher self." And I said, "Ira, what does that mean?" And he said, "It means go home, get a job, get married, have children." And that's what I did. So I got my answers, sort of that I was expecting Baba to give me the direction. And Ira gave it to me eventually. So, and that's been my path. And, you know, there have been a lot of ups and downs, but that message was what directed my life.
I'll be brief and talk about two things that happened. Like Winnie, I felt just full of Baba from the Darshan. And everything was wonderful, and I was going to be wonderful, and the world was going to be great. And I went back to Massachusetts, and I spread it around my area. Everybody I met, I would give a big hug to. And I was eternally smiling. And people, when they saw me, would smile, and I would hug them. And I became sort of, I don't know what I became, but one day that summer, I went to the lake and left a note and said, "Gone to the lake, be back in the evening." And when I got home, someone had said, "I was here," and signed their name. And by the end of the day, 56 people had come to see me. Wow. And they kept coming. And they would sit in my house and meditate, and I would be smiling and welcoming them for Baba. And this went on and on and on. And after a while, I sort of got tired of it. Who am I? You know, I don't know anything. Why are all these people coming? Of course, they were coming because I was full of Baba. But one day, Baba sort of grabbed me and pulled me up to the ceiling and made me look down at all these people sitting in meditation. And I thought it was funny. Baba gave me a sense of humor about it. And I started laughing, and I couldn't stop laughing. And I interrupted all this meditation and everything, and I kind of began to lose my reputation. And things dwindled out, and September came, and October came, and I thought, Baba's got to show me what to do. I don't know what to do. And he didn't show me, and I was running out of money. I was running out of food. I didn't know what to do, so I had gotten an old ratty car, and I live up in the hills, and when you leave, you go down and you come to Route 2, and it's a T. You got to turn left or right. There's no other way to go. So I said, Baba, I'm going down, and when I get to the bottom, I'll go the way that you want me to. And I did, and I got to the bottom, and it was to the left. So I turned to the left, and I got to the nearest town, Greenfield, and I had some friends there, and I got a job. It was being a waiter and a bartender. So I cut my beard off and cut my hair and sort of became normal. But Baba kept working on me all the time. And yet I felt that there was something. I went to India every other year and came down to the center for the first time and moved to Chapel Hill for a while and got a job at the UNC library. And I always found myself drawn back to my place in Heath. Like that was my place. But I needed to come out every now and then to make money. And this life went on that way, and I felt that I wanted to give all to Baba and do exactly what he wanted me to. And it was at times easy and at times difficult. And one story was when I was in India, it was difficult getting there. But when I got there, the first thing we did was go to the tomb, and then it was a weekend, so we went to Marazad. I came back, and then the next day I went to the tomb, and in the tomb, Baba said, okay, leave. Well, 3 days after all this struggle to get there and working and saving money to get there, I didn't want to go. So I stayed a while longer. I made a mistake. And it was the worst experience of my life. There I was in Mehrabad, just miserable. So finally I said, okay, Baba, I'll go home. So I made arrangements and got back and went home. And when I got back home, my dearest friend in Heath was a woman from Vienna, Austria, who was just a wonderful lady, and I just adored her. She had developed cancer and was beginning the end of her life. They had bought a finca in Spain on the Costa Brava, and her husband wanted to go back and sell it so they would have enough money to survive the medical costs and things. But he didn't want to leave his wife Maria alone, and they didn't know what to do. And then I appeared, and Maria looked at me and said, Don, she says, I know you're here. You've got to stay with me while my husband is away. So that's what I did. The next 2 months, I lived with Maria and helped her reaching the end. And it didn't mind. I loved it, actually, because it was just delightful to help a friend. And then I realized, well, that's what Baba wanted me to do. He wanted me to come back and serve and do that for a friend. And staying in India was not what he wanted me to do. And I just think Baba is still with me. He's still with you. He still guides us, and if we really listen inwardly, we know what to do, because his love and care will guide us. Thank you.
Thank you. How lovely to see everyone, especially familiar faces. Let's see. Yes, it's a little hard to recognize everyone, including myself. I heard something at the Southeast Gathering that I wanted to tell you. Someone said there were 3 stages of life. There's young age, there's middle age, and there's, you're looking good. love that. So, you're looking good. A little higher, yes, thank you. That's great, thank you, Gil. Well, I wanted to tell a story about, or this story, about hearing about Baba dropping the body, which I know is familiar to some of you, but it seems apropos. I was at Mayor House making sandwiches for Happy Club, and those of you who know Happy Club, it was the famous, infamous peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. That was a running joke for years, because that's all we ever had, and cookies. So I was making the sandwiches, it was a Saturday, and all of a sudden the phone rings, and it's Kitty. And Kitty says, Elizabeth would like to see you. But she didn't say it in a very urgent way, you know. I said, all right, Kitty. And I hung up. I kept making the sandwiches. And about 2 minutes later, the phone rang again. And Kitty said in a very serious voice, I thought I told you Elizabeth wanted to see you. And I was, you know, and she said, and I said, oh, Kitty, I thought you meant after Happy Club. And she said, there won't be Happy Club today. And for some reason, I don't know why, but in that moment I knew. And my heart sank all the way to the bottom. I couldn't believe it. I just knew it. And I ran over, of course. And I walked into Dill River and went right to Annie Booth, Elizabeth's room. And she was sitting on her bed, which was her office, most of you know. And her legs were up. And I looked at her face, and she had one tear rolling here, one tear rolling there. And Annie Boo didn't cry, very rarely. So that was struck me. And she said, at 2 a.m., Baba awoke me, and I heard the words, I know my Redeemer still liveth. That's all she said. Then she told me, though, that the cable guy who always delivered cables from India called, and he said, Mrs. Patterson, in all the years I've delivered cables to you, this is one I don't want to give you. And she said, it's all right, I already know. And he read the cable from Adi, the famous, wonderful cable, how Baba's come to live within our hearts. So I was very upset, of course, and I didn't know what to do. I was bereft, and I just didn't know what to do. I felt stunned and kind of at a loss. And then I watched Elizabeth and Kitty and how they handled everything with great poise, and Kitty with cheerfulness. And I was so struck by that. It didn't help me, but I did notice it. It was so touching. And Hetty, did you share the story yet about the men? Kitty, no? Okay. Have you shared? Have you already shared, honey? Oh, okay. Well, anyway, I won't tell it. Your story. Your story. No. Well, it's a wonderful example, Hetty, of Kitty. Hetty was sharing with me how 3 young men came who knew very little about Baba, were strangers really. And they came to the door and they asked about Meher Baba. And Kitty, with great cheer and smile, oh yes, come in, come in. And he just dropped his body, you know, and just like that. I mean, such incredible. Many people wanted, not many, but some people felt the urge to go right away. And Elizabeth felt very strongly that we should keep to the appointment that Baba made. So many of us did not go, and she didn't go. Kitty and Elizabeth and decided that Baba wanted them to go when he said he wanted us to go. Oh. So we did go when all of you went, and like you, that first morning was, I'm sure that's been said, when Eric stood up and said, it's 9, and the clock chimed 9 times. It's 9 o'clock, and we have kept our appointment with God. And my memory is that every head went down in the hall. And there was wonderful silence. And then one day Pukar got up, And he couldn't talk. Do you remember? He couldn't say a word. He started weeping and weeping, and of course that was hard. You know, we just stood there watching Pukar weep. And I don't know for how long, but it was so touching and just very moving. So I just wanted to share a couple of things, maybe 3 things that happened that I remember vividly. One of them was, let's see, yes, this was extraordinary. I had the privilege of sitting up front. Mara was on my left, Monty was on Mara's left, and all of a sudden I become aware, it took me a moment, but I heard a voice in my ear, very dim, a whisper, and I didn't even register at first. It was so unusual that somebody was whispering in my ear, and I turned, and it was Mara, and she started telling me the whole story of the 52 accident. Everything. And I of course was stunned, but and Monty was trying to stop her. Monty was, you know, because people were performing, and Monty was always conscious of that, you know. And Mara didn't stop. And even with my hearing loss, I could hear most of what she was saying. And a lot of it was about the suffering, Baba's suffering, and the blood. And I knew intuitively that it was the grief of Baba leaving that brought up all this pain around the memory of the accident. That's what I felt anyway, I don't know.
How old were you, Wendy?
Me, 17. Me?
Yeah, you were 17.
17, yeah. Very ignorant 17. So, let's see. So then, so that was remarkable. I remember that vividly. Another thing I remember is I had to go to the bathroom, and Monty directed me through the curtain back to the women's bedroom, I guess. I'm not really sure. And no, Monty wasn't there. That's the whole point. Someone, one of the Mandali told me to go. And as I went through the curtain and I walk around the corner, there's Monty sitting in a chair weeping, just weeping. And I tell you, I just, you know, what could I do? I just stopped in my tracks. And this cheerful, wonderful spirit that we all knew. And here she was just weeping. And I didn't say anything, of course. But again, intuitively, I knew that she couldn't, you all know, she couldn't do it in front of me, Mara. So it was a private moment. So I just kept going. I just kept going around to the restaurant anyway. So that was a very vivid memory for me, to see her, of all people. Okay, another memory that's a happy one is that we performed, I don't know, is Jim here? Jim Meyer?
He talked about
He
it
was.
yesterday.
He was.
He talked about the play. He talked about the play yesterday.
He did? Oh, okay. Did he talk about how we performed Francis Brabazon's plays?
Yes.
And did he
talked
tell
about not remembering.
But he didn't remember doing
it. He didn't.
So you tell.
That's funny. Did he tell you how someone fainted?
No,
Well, it's very funny.
You tell the story.
My mother directed, and it was the hardest thing she'd ever done, because all of us were complaining about the heat. I mean, none of us were used to this intense heat. And my sister-in-law fainted. I mean, it was really dramatic. And poor mother just like trying so hard to get us to come together, pull us together for this little, all we had to do was 2 little plays of Francis, the Moon and the Stranger. And do you remember it? Anybody remember sitting there?
No, I remember them happening, but I don't remember any of the details.
Oh, well, that's only, and I don't remember much. Because I was in it, I do remember Margaret fainting. But the lovely part I remember, was so sweet, was in the middle of the play, one of them, I looked down, just inadvertently caught Francis Brabazon was sitting right there. And I caught his eyes, and he was weeping, crying. And I was so taken with that. So I asked him afterwards, I said, Francis, did I see you crying? And he said, yes. He said, you see, I've never seen my plays performed before. It was the first time anyone had seen, and he was very touched. Yeah. I like Francis very much. It was so easy to connect with him. Anyway, then there's I don't know, I'm sure no one's told. Well, Elaine, did you tell? Oh, yes,
No.
I know. How's that? That's better, yeah. Have you all been able to hear me, though?
Yes.
Okay. Did you tell about the,
No, I did not hear.
It's very sweet of you, actually.
I wouldn't do that.
Good of you, I won't tell that. I have to now. I have to. But Elaine, you should tell it. It's hysterical. I mean, I think it is.
I'll try to be really brief because everybody really wants to hear it now, and you did this, not me. Yes. Just hold the mic.
Okay, we're on the flight. We finally get on this plane, right? All the food and drink and everything. And we had to make a stop in Cairo. Okay, no, this is 69, and the War of 67 was still very alive. And so, this child, we get on the plane, and because of the war, I'm not sure why, but the plane landed way out on the tarmac. And so they brought buses to pick us up, and the kind where the doors open on both ends or even in the middle. And at every door, there was a man in uniform holding a machine gun, standing across the door like this. And we're all packed in to this bus. And I happened to get in the bus with this sweetheart. And so we're all packed in, and it's Cairo. It's really hot in there. And the doors are open because the men are standing in front of them. Do you remember this?
Wait till you tell the punchline.
Here's the punchline. We're all packed in there. The bus starts to move, and this one starts singing, Hava Nagila, And I went into rictus. Oh my God. Somebody stop her. She was a few people away, But I think the guards didn't know. Maybe they knew the song. Maybe they knew that it represented their, at that time, mortal enemy. I don't know. Nothing happened, but several of us were looking like, where's that coming from? And also at the Darshan, she rode around constantly on the back of the motorcycle of Dr. Barucha. And she was just the cutest thing there. And I have just adored her ever since those events.
I'm so glad you did, because it could have gone the other way. Thank you, Elaine. Well, I just want to say in my defense, I had no idea. I didn't know what was going on about the war or anything. I really thought it was very appropriate. And I love that song, Okay, so let's see. Oh, and another funny thing that happened, we were at Meherzad, and I don't know, I know someone told me they remember this, and I fell in the duck pond. Do you know the duck pond? And I got all wet. It was wonderful because it was so hot. I didn't do it on purpose, though, honest. Something happened. Somebody, I don't know, I tripped, fell backwards, and it was so much fun, actually. Everybody was laughing hysterically. So I never forgot that, of course. And I have had a couple of people come up to me and say, do you remember when you fell in the duck pond? Yes. One more story. I think I have, two more. I better not say that. You know how I am. Every story reminds me of another story. But I do want to tell you, we remember in the we went to see the film the first time, the entombment film. And I had a very hard time with that. I just couldn't take it. So 10 minutes into it, I think, I got up and walked out. And I'm heading to the doors of the center to go out. And right as I'm getting there, Elizabeth Annie Boo reaches the door. And she looks at me and tears just a little bit. She never sobbed, she was little tears. And she said, "That's not the Baba I remember." So she couldn't be there either. So let's see, what's her, yes, this kind of sums up for me the joy, the sadness and the joy of Baba dropping his body. And I'll start here. I have to backtrack to 62, East-West Gathering. And you know that Baba planned every detail of that trip, as he planned every detail of this one, 69. Every single detail. Baba, because we were expecting to see him. So it was the same as 62. He planned everything. So of course one of the important details was to go to Meherazad and Meherabad. After the Darshan, we had this extraordinary, joyful time with Baba, radiant, until the last day. It's another story. Too many stories. But, Mani would say that. One day Mani went like this, "Oh, too many stories, so many details. Every detail leads to another story." So that's how I feel. Anyway, so then we go to the tomb first, Meherabad. And I was dreading it. I'm 11 years old, and I'm dreading this. And with good reason, because we had just left this incredible, and had this incredible experience in Pune, and Baba was still there. And so here we have to go to his tomb, an empty tomb. So I remember being very unhappy and kind of resisting, but of course I did go down. I went down the steps, and it was cold to me. Not everyone had this experience. Jenny Keating had an opposite experience. But my experience, because I was older, is that it was dank and cold, and I was very unhappy. So I never forgot that. So I'm going to fast forward now to 69. And again, Baba has planned that we go to Meherabad and Meherazad. So we go to the tomb first, of course. And I was dreading it because I remembered 62. And I tell you, the minute I stepped over the threshold, I felt the waves and waves of joy, waves of love. Oh my God, it was unbelievable. I almost went to my knees. It was so powerful. And I was filled with joy. And I knew Baba was saying inwardly to me, "You see, Wendy, I haven't gone anywhere, just into your hearts." And that was the beginning for me. It was just the beginning. It's been a very long, long journey of coming to find Baba here, because my focus was always on the form. And it took a long time for me, but I had wonderful memories to help me. Like 1962, Baba stopped in the middle of a discourse, and he looked at all of us. You all, some of you know this, that I've said, and he looked at us very purposely, which was quite unusual, because in 62, Baba didn't meet your eye, very rarely. So this time he was looking at us, and he said, "This is not me. It's only a cloak I put on in which I come to visit you." He said, look within," and he pointed to our hearts. "Look within, that's where I am. I am none other than the highest within you." He said it again, "Look within," like this. "I am none other than the highest within you." So that came, those kinds of beautiful things, moments came back to me, and I knew Baba was saying, "See, I told you, I told you." And Elizabeth said that too, that Baba was weaning them away, slowly but surely. And in 62, that was really kind of a major weaning away. Kitty thought she would be coming back to be with Baba. That's an example. And Baba said no. So she knew. One more thing, because it is too tempting, but there's one more thing that happened a lot at Del River after Baba dropped the body. Young people were coming all the time, you know, long hair, wild looking, hippies, and Kitty and Court. Oh, really? It was oh yes, it was you guys. Oh, that's so funny. It was you guys. And they would say, asking, the question was, the perennial question, how do we find him? How do we didn't see him, we didn't meet him. What do we do? What do we do now? That was the question. And Kitty and Elizabeth said the same thing every time. But you see, he's here. He is training you in the same way that he trained us. Every single time that was their answer. He is here. He is here. He is training you in the same way that he trained us, which is pretty extraordinary when you try to wrap your brain around that. But as people I'm sure have shared, and I heard a little bit, I'm sorry I was late, but for me personally, that has been the journey of coming to understand and experience is a better word, that Baba is, as you said, Don, guiding us all the time, if we're listening, if we're paying attention. And that's why he stressed, oh, that's another thing. Baba stressed, as you know, remembrance so much. And one of the things I remember clearly, I don't remember a lot, everything, East West Gathering, but Baba picking up his hem and saying, hold tight, hold fast to my hem, hold tight. And I remember that visually, you know, and I knew, years later, that for me meant remembrance. Remember him, remember me, and hold fast. That was the word, hold fast to my demand, not tight. And so for me, it has been a journey. My journey with Baba started out as an outer journey, an unconscious inner journey, but an outer conscious journey. I must have had an inner relationship, but I didn't know it. That's my point. So then the journey, the inner consciousness began consciously after Baba dropped the body. And that's, as you also said, it's hard and it's work. And it's harder work than having, well, it's just hard work, as you all know. Trusting Baba completely. Hard work. Anyway.